Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to cross the water once again and we're going to return to Denmark, which as we all know is a very good beer country these days. Now, the brewery that we're going to have a look at today is one that is featured on the channel a couple of times before. It's been about a year since I last reviewed a beer from this brewery, which was kind of hard to believe, but this is a beer that they brewed for something of a special occasion, I guess we could say, and it's also one that I've actually tried before at their brew pub, bar, whatever we can call it at the moment, in Copenhagen. And it's a style that I very much enjoy actually. So I thought it'd be a nice place to kick off some more Danish reviews from, and hopefully you guys enjoy my take on this one. It's a little bit difficult actually to say what style this brewery are best known for, but they have been diversifying a lot in recent times and doing some very interesting stuff. So this is one of the Danish breweries that are very much up and coming, and one that I would recommend that you check out if you get the chance. But let's see what we have with this one then. So for this review, I guess we could say we're going to two different places as of September 2022. We could say we're going to Copenhagen, or we could say we're going to Kolding, which is in the southeastern part of Jylland, the mainland part of Denmark that's attached to Germany, whatever one you want to say. But regardless, we are going to have a look at another beer from Bryggeriet Åben, or the Open Brewery, as you might say in English. And this one is simply entitled 5th Anniversary. So it comes in at 8% ABV, and this is a West Coast double imperial, whatever you want to call it, IPA. You might see these being called California IPAs these days as well. But yeah, as I say, I know this beer is very good, and I'm looking forward to trying it for you once again here on the channel. Nice to kick off some more Danish reviews for you. I do love my Danish beers. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Bryggeriet Åben before, and we will no doubt add more to that at some point in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. Make sure you check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You will find this one in the Danish playlist, which we will add to in the future as well. And as always, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you would like to see more beer reviews. The support you give the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Bryggeriet Åben. So Bryggeriet Åben, the Open Brewery, are based in Kolding, or I guess we need to say originally based in Kolding, in the southern part of Denmark, southern Jylland, the bit that's attached to Germany, whatever we want to say. So the company was founded back in 2017 by Philip Hulgaard and Johannes Karstoft, who had been friends and homebrewers for a number of years. So Johannes was trained as an agriculture economist and had his own farm, whereas Philip had a background in IT and worked in the capital, Copenhagen. So they set up the brewery on Philip's mother's farm at Birkemosevej. Apologies for the bad Danish pronunciation. That's the most difficult thing with Danish, is pronouncing it correctly. But the brewery was opened up in June of 2018. Soon after, Philip left his IT job to concentrate fully on his job at the brewery, and Johannes works on supplying the brewery with materials from the farm. But at maximum, the farm brewery produces around 150,000 litres of beer per year, and they're operating a 700-litre brew kit. In September of 2020, they opened their bar in Aarhus, which has 24 taps, and they're also involved in the Gustav Wiels bar in Copenhagen. But in 2022, they also opened a brew pub in Sydbyen, the meatpacking district in the city, where they had previously run a pop-up bar. But the new facility in Copenhagen is going to act as their main brewery going forward, and as it stands, as of September 2022, they are moving all of the brewing capacity over to Copenhagen. So I think the old brew kit is going to be brought from Kolding and used as a sort of pilot brewery within the new facility that they have, and it is quite impressive actually, so hopefully that will open up quite soon. But as of September 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 160 different kinds of beer thus far according to Untappd, and like I said, they're doing a number of different styles. Their New England IPAs are very well regarded, they're doing a few sour beers, they're doing some West Coast IPAs like this, and they have had a few lagers in the past from what I remember as well. But yeah, very much an up and coming Danish brewery, and one that I do recommend that you check out if you get the chance. But that's all I can tell you about the brewery for the moment. We will no doubt add more to the brewery notes at some point in the near future, but check them out. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website, which you'll find in the description below, and you can check out the other reviews that I've done from them in the past. And yeah, that's that. So let's get on and actually have a little look at the beer itself then. So as you can see, this one has the classic Åben label there. There you can see the Danish A, or O, as we just say. So as I said to you earlier, Åben in Danish is it basically means open. We would say öppet in Swedish. So yeah, it tells you a little bit about the beer on the side here. It says, brewed at the new Åben Brewery in Sjöbo in Copenhagen, this beer is a celebration of everything that has happened since Åben was founded in Kolding 5 years ago. Honouring a new beginning as a brewery in Copenhagen, this beer is one of the first brews running through the tubes of the new system. It is developed by our dear brewer Lasse, who has been a central part of Åben Brewery family since 2020. So yeah, this should be quite nice. It's a 440 milliliter can, this one, and I bought this beer at Kiosk in Copenhagen, which was a very good place to get your craft beer. There are some other very good beer shops as well, Fish and Beer, and also Beer Hive, both of which you'll find in Amar, and there are other ones there as well. But yeah, those are the three that I mainly go to: Fish and Beer, Kiosk, and Beer Hive. Check all of those out. Plain silver top on the can there. I forget how much I actually paid for this beer. I think it might have been about 50 Danish kroner, I can't quite remember, but that translates to roughly 65 Swedish, something like that. And yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah, I think I paid about 65 Swedish kroner for that. So that is about €6.50, £6 sterling, somewhere in the region of like $7 American, a little bit more than that. But yeah, 8% West Coast Double IPA, this one. Remember, the name is simply 5th Anniversary. There's nothing about the different types of hops and things in this one. Oh, sorry, I'm telling lies. This one is hopped with Idaho 7 and Azacca, which we know quite well. Both of them are American. Both of them come in at 14% alpha acid. Idaho 7 is going to give you a lot of kind of light tropical fruit, good juicy mango, but also some pineapple, some apricots, a little bit papaya, whereas Azacca is going to give you quite a lot of pineapple, but also a big kind of juicy tangerine sort of thing. I don't know if I've had Azacca in a West Coast IPA before, actually. But yeah, let's get this guy out then, and we'll get on with the tasting. I'm curious to see what this is going to have in store for us once again, because it was very nice when I had it on tap. So maybe I can think and do a little bit of a comparison with this one, but I do love a good West Coast IPA. I think it's a style that has been forgotten about wrongly in recent times. But yeah, anyway, we've got maybe about 80% of it out into the glass at the moment. But yeah, it looks good. So as you can see, this beer is poured with about a finger and a half of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head there. If I bring that up to the camera, you can see there are some very small bubbles in there, but it does have a little bit of a kind of bumpy quality to it as well. In terms of the colour, you can see that this one has a nice, very light amber. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on, one, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, unless you get a dark colour of beer. Any barrel aging you do, or any adjuncts that you put in, will also affect the colour of your beer. But when it comes to IPAs, generally speaking, any type of IPA, you don't have to care so much about adjuncts or barrel aging. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but overall it does look very nice. But as I say, a very kind of light amber colour this one. I'd be very curious to know what the malt base in this one is, but you can get West Coast IPAs that are a lot darker and more kind of mahogany in colour than this one is. This is a very light one in terms of its level of amber, I guess we could say. But yeah, the head is fading away to just be a nice kind of thinner foamy layer, but it's not losing everything, we have to say. But good little bit of transparency to this one. It has more of a kind of natural haze to it rather than anything else. Nothing untoward about it when you consider what style it is. This is something that you would expect from West Coast IPAs. So let's have a closer look at the aroma and see what we get out of this one then. I'm really curious about this. Yeah, that is pretty damn nice. Yeah, so as I've said to you before, for me, West Coast IPAs can go two different ways. They can either be more kind of biscuity and bready on the one hand, like Pliny the Elder, or they can be big oily and caramelly beasts, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo. And this one It's very much more along the lines of the kind of Pliny the Elder type West Coast IPA. It's got a lovely, there's a lot of kind of brown bread coming out of it. It's got a nice kind of biscuitiness to it. And then, yeah, the green component is a little bit kind of more mild in a sense. And then it's got some nice big oily fruity characters. That's the first impression of it. One of the big complaints I've had about West Coast IPAs in more recent times is that they don't have the big, bold bitterness, you know, the 80 IBUs that they used to have back in the day. And that's because a lot of beer drinkers have come into craft beer these days on the New England IPAs, which are obviously a lot less bitter. But me, I want a big old school 80, at least 80 IBU West Coast IPA. And one thing I will say about this is that on first impression, the aroma does not give you the impression that it's going to be like that. So yeah, keep that in mind with this. But I do quite like the aroma in this one. I'm a sucker for these sweeter, orangey leaning IPAs, and that's certainly what you get here. But let's break that aroma down for you a wee bit more and describe it a little bit more in depth. So when we sugar the beer up a little bit, you get a nice little bit of a kind of brown bready, wholemeal bready bread crust coming out of it. There's a kind of mix between kind of wholemeal brown bread. There's a little bit of white bread in there as well, and there's certainly a good little bit of brown sugar. There's a nice kind of oily caramel. Good little bit of kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit as well. So it smells quite layered. Bread crust, a little bit of white bread, a little bit of brown bread. Then you've got the McVitie's digestive biscuit and a more oily kind of sweet caramel out of it too. The other things in the malt base, you might pick up a little kind of slight touch of woodiness, but compared to the New Englands, this one certainly doesn't have all that much in the way of yeasty characteristics. The malt base is definitely a little bit more straightforward. There's something very familiar about this, and just some of the kind of slightly biscuity and slightly woody notes that this has makes me wonder if there's a little bit of like Maris Otter in here. It does have a little bit of that kind of English IPA character, so really wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of Maris Otter in this one. Could also be a little bit of Vienna malt, but Vienna malt would give you, just from memory, a little bit more of a dryness to the bread crust, and this one is actually quite an oily and really sweet leaning malt base. It doesn't have so much in the way of dryness to it, but I like how I do like how all of that goes together for sure. Yeah, malty wise, this is quite nice. It's not overly sweet, and the brown sugars don't come across as being overly leathery. As I say, a straight up sweet caramel McVitie's digestive biscuit. Other than that, I don't think we really need to see anything about the malty side of the beer. On the hoppy side of things then, green component first, there's a little bit of earthiness for sure. It's actually quite a wet green component once again, and this is the thing that surprises me about this beer. West Coast IPAs tend to have a hell of a lot of bittering hops, or at least they did back in the day. Now remember, early edition hops within the first hour of the wort boil, usually it's 90 minutes, the first hour of the wort boil is where you get all your bitterness. So these back in the day had a lot within that, a bit of Chinook, a bit of Columbus, Tomahawk, whatever. You could have quite a few different things in there, and that would give you a big piney resin or a big kind of spicy floral note. You don't get overly much out of this beer. This one has a wee bit of earthiness, a bit of a wet floral character, but it's got a lot of kind of wet, freshly cut grass to it as well. So I'm curious to see, because I can't quite remember, I'm curious to see how this one's going to be in terms of its IBU count, because I remember it being nice, but I can't remember exactly what the bitterness was like. But yeah, there's a lot of wet, freshly cut grass to this one, which tells me that not so much in the way of bittering hops, but quite a lot in the way of late addition and dry hopping. Remember, late addition and dry hopping. Late addition gives you a tiny bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma, and then dry hopping after the wort boil is going to give you only flavour and aroma. And that's what New England IPAs tend to rely on, but more modern West Coast IPAs have quite a bit of that as well. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the green component. The green component in this one is quite interesting. You've got a little bit of a kind of oily, mango-y note to it. You can get a little bit of a more oily pineapple, but there's a big, juicy, kind of more Amarillo-leaning orange, this one. It's not quite as zesty as Amarillo, and Azaka, yeah, I remember it being more soft and juicy tangerine, but it has this kind of juicy, soft, but still slightly oily orange. But yeah, mangoes, pineapple, and a wee bit of an oily tangerine orange in this one. Aroma-wise, this is very nice. So yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time to ponder over the aroma of the beer before you get stuck in. But I think it's about time that we taste this one. So yeah, this is the 5th anniversary, a West Coast double IPA 8% ABV from Bryggeriet Åben. Originally from Kolding, now basing themselves in Copenhagen in Denmark. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah. That is quite nice, this one. Now, I remember it being a little bit more bitter on tap. And you know, that could just be because I think it was about 2 weeks since I was over in Copenhagen drinking this beer with my friend at the Åben bar. But the bitterness, you can feel the bitterness building in this one, which is quite interesting. It certainly strikes me as a more modern take on the West Coast IPA style, but it's one of the better ones because it does give you a bit more of that bitterness the further that you go into the aftertaste. And again, what I said earlier about there being a little bit of Maris Otter in this is sticking in my mind because you can really get a wee bit of that in the malty character of this beer. And it's got the big oily fruity notes, the green component, as I said, has a good little bit of grassiness to it. But yeah, this beer, it has some similarities between aroma and the actual flavour that you get. But I like this, it gets a thumbs up from me. It's certainly nice to try it once again. So yeah, let's break this down and describe it for you a wee bit more. But it's like, in the beginning, it's more like a modern take on the West Coast IPA, but as it progresses, it gives you a bit more of what you would expect from the old school versions of the style. So yeah, let's have a go at this. Yeah, middle of your palate then. Middle third of your palate. So the backbone of the beer, as I said, it has a nice little bit of that kind of fresh white bread, hedgehog roll bread crust. That's forming the backbone of the beer. On top of that, you get a sort of wholemeal brown bready character. And then there's another layer on top of that where you get a more white bready sort of thing. And there's just something about the flavour profile of this beer that makes me want to say there's a bit of Maris Otter in this. There's just something that's overly familiar about this. It reminds me of some of the beers from my local brewery, Williams Brothers Brewing, back in Scotland. They do a lot of session beers, and just something about the malt base is reminding me of them, and they love Maris Otter there. So yeah, it's a wee bit of that kind of brown bready and biscuity character you get that really just makes me think Maris Otter. Yeah. And regardless of what type of Maris Otter it is, be it pale or extra pale or whatever, it still gives you that kind of same mix of biscuit and brown bread, and it just works, and that adds a really nice complexity to the malt base. So as I say, hedgehog bread roll in the base, a little bit of a wholemeal brown bready sort of thing, the white bread on top of that, and then you've got the brown sugars. So yeah, I like how that goes together. So on top of the white bread, you can feel there's a sort of circle in the middle of your palate. And it's interesting, this is where you're getting some things. So the base layer of that big circle is more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit. As you go into the dead centre of your palate, you'll feel a more kind of straight up caramel, and that's covering up the booziness of the beer. I often find that alcohol flavours give you this more caramelly, boozy sort of thing. And then yeah, as you move out from the centre of your palate, you'll get a little bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. So yeah, straight up big oily caramel there in the dead centre of your palate. As I say, it mellows out to be, it's got a bit of that boozy caramel I should say, but as you move out from that, it becomes a slightly sweeter sort of thing, and as you go toward the edges of your palate there, as you go towards the edges of your palate, it's got that more McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of vibe to it. So I really appreciate that when it comes to this beer. And then you've got that brown bready, Maris Ottery type thing coming out of it as well. But this beer really does sweeten up and become more and more kind of biscuity the further you go into the aftertaste. Toward the front of that middle third of your palate, I should say, you start to get a little touch of a smooth, woody character out of this one, which is really interesting. And it does, this beer to a degree, it really does remind me of the likes of the Joker, or the Double Joker IPA from Williams Brothers back home in the motherland of Scotland. So this beer does have a wee bit of a nostalgic thing for me, and maybe that's why I enjoyed this one so much. It certainly does give you a wee bit of that kind of English IPA character because of what I heavily suspect is Maris Otter malt. Yeah, I like that. Of course, in America, they would use maybe a bit of crystal. That's another option for this one. It could be crystal malt they're using in here. But in America, they would use things like different types of Turo to give you all of these big kind of sweet flavours. Crystal, if I remember rightly, tends to be from Germany. But regardless, I think the malt base on this is quite nice. It shows you a proper old, it gives you a little bit of the old school English sort of thing, but a bit of that kind of sweeter side from the modern, the more modern American styles. And it is one of the more kind of biscuity leaning West Coast IPAs, but it does have an oily caramel side too as well. But anyway, back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of more grainy, brown bready, bread crusty build up there. The base of that back third of the palate gives you a bit more of a kind of dry. It does give you a little bit more of a kind of dry, kind of bread crusty note, so you get a bit more graininess there, but on top of that you can feel there's a slightly taller brown wholemeal bread sort of layer, and on top of that it's a more it is a little bit of a more kind of yeast. You do get a bit of that more airy yeasty sort of thing in there, so again a kind of fluffy white bread with a bit of woodiness to it, which I really like. So yeah, that's really, really good. Yeah, I like that with this one. Yeah. Flavour wise, it goes together. That back third of the palate, I think, does just give you a bit more airiness and yeastiness, but you can feel on the back third of the palate the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward, it just condenses down that wee bit, which is nice. So yeah, I think that's everything to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. On the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it does give you a wee bit of a herbal character, but it really does give you a nice big kind of deep floral kind of note to it. I don't know if I'd go quite as far as saying kind of piney resin with this one. There are little hints of that. It doesn't have that sort of Columbus Chinook type thing to it, in my opinion. It's that, but all of these big high alpha acid American hops are capable of giving you this, but to me it feels like a more kind of deep seeded floral kind of note. And as you move toward the front corners of the palate, it does give you a little touch of spice. Round the front curve of the palate though, it's definitely a kind of more wet, grassy sort of thing you get out of this one, and there's a good wee bit of a zesty note to it as well, which I do enjoy. So yeah, that's interesting. The green component has a good little bit of spice and a bit of depth to it, but it's quite oily for sure. But let's focus on that front third of the palate and the fruity flavours of the beer. So yeah, as you would expect from any kind of good West Coast IPA, this one certainly has a more kind of oily, it certainly has a more kind of oily, fruity component to it. But border region between front third and middle third palate, again, you get a little bit of that more bready, brown bready build up. The base of it is a bit more of a kind of smooth brown bready sort of thing, and on top of that, you get that nice big oily, fruity character to it. And this is interesting for me because at the back of that front third of your palate, you actually do get a more kind of pungenty passion fruit, or maybe a bit of grapefruit. So I'm wondering, with the basis of this, maybe there is a wee bit of Chinook in here, because the more that I drink of it, I do get a bit of pine resin. So I would not be surprised if there's a bit of Chinook, and maybe even a little bit of Cascade in this have been used as bittering hops. Because yeah, I'm getting a little bit of that kind of more pungent grapefruit, maybe a slight passion fruit sort of thing coming out of this one. So that's interesting. And the beer, the base of that front third of your palate has a wee bit of this slightly, how would you say, it's got a little bit of an almost kind of, it's got a wee bit of like sultana to it, but also a little bit of a kind of red curranty sort of thing, and you get that from Cascade. So I wouldn't be surprised if the base hops in this, it's a bit old school, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of Chinook and a bit of cascade in this one for bittering. But on top of that, on the back of that front third of your palate, there's a nice oily kind of mangoey colour, but as you flavour, sorry, but as you come further forward, you get a little bit of an oily kind of peary sort of thing. It's almost a little bit datey in some ways as well, which is kind of interesting. But you get a bit of oily pineapple in there too. I'm guessing that's the Idaho 7. And as I've said, when it comes to different malt bases, different hops can behave differently depending on what malt base they're mixed with, and you can really get a bit of that in this beer for sure. So yeah, it's interesting to see how the Idaho 7's behaving in this one, because it's giving you a good kind of oily mango, but a wee bit of this datey, apricot-y, pineapple sort of thing, but the Azacca is going to give you that too. But certainly on the front half of that front third of your palate, it's all about the big, juicy, orangey, tangerine sort of thing, and that, yeah, that's the Azacca for sure. And yeah, that lasts into the aftertaste. I think it's the orange that starts to dominate the further you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, it's a really nicely done beer, this one. It builds in bitterness as you go further on, and as I said, when it comes to the West Coast IPA style, it's got a nice, it's certainly like a more biscuity example, but it does have some oily characteristics too, and a wee bit of the English sort of thing because of what I suspect is Maris Otter. But yeah, I think we can leave it there for the flavour profile, and we can round off with the mouthfeel. So mouthfeel wise, this one, it's quite I'd say pushing toward the top end of full-bodied, top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. That's where I would say it is. Carbonation is very smooth. It's actually quite an oily beer, this one, which I do quite enjoy. But yeah, in terms of IBUs, I think this one maybe has about 50. It's not going to blow the head off you in terms of bitterness as some of the old school ones would. I think it's maybe about 50 IBUs. Still low compared to the 80 that the style used to have as a minimum. But the malt base has a good bit of graininess, a good little bit of oily sweetness as well, and it gives you a wee bit of biscuitiness the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, lovely oily fruity characters, a mix between kind of dry fruit, a little bit of tropical fruit, and a big oily orange. But for me, a really enjoyable West Coast double IPA, and it does remind me a little bit of the Double Joker or the Joker from Williams Brothers back home in the motherland of Scotland, which is quite nice. It's got a wee bit of nostalgia to it. But yeah, I think that's everything that we really need to say about this beer. So yeah, that was the 5th anniversary, a West Coast double IPA coming in at 8% ABV from Bryggeriet Åben, originally based in Kolding in Jylland, and now based in the Danish capital of Copenhagen. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Bryggeriet Åben, and we will return to these guys soon. Check out their social media, try some of their beers, and see what you think. And do give me some Danish beer recommendations in the comment section below. Till the next time, Slange, Skull, cheers, and I'll see you guys again very, very soon.